Yeah, let's do that.
So, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. Nice to see so many of you joining us. We will be starting the webinar on the topic of why elasticities are an unnecessary evil, which is a great topic, and I'm really excited to hear a bit more about what Ingo is going to say this afternoon. So it'll be a short webinar today of about 30 minutes, and we'll leave some time at the end to ask some questions. Please use the chat and we'll go through them all at the end, which we can answer between Ingo and myself. So without further ado, let's get going. So joining myself today is the co-founder and managing director of Buynomics, Dr. Ingo Reinhardt, who has 12 years on experience in pricing, and this person who developed the Buynomics method and has a lot of experience with things like price elasticity. So got some great insights that he's going to be sharing today. I'm mostly been on hosting duties, but very quick intro to myself. So I look after sales at Buynomics. I've got 13 years or so history in mainly within CPG, but looking at data and analytics, and I'll just be supporting Ingo today and answering any other questions that might fall into my area. So just as a quick introduction to who we are, and an introduction to Buynomics if you haven't heard of us already. So we're approximately 3 years in the making now. We are essentially a SaaS company based out of our offices in Cologne. I've already introduced Ingo. Ingo, in conjunction with Sebastian, founded Buynomics, who are veterans of the pricing and consultancy world with very strong backgrounds with PhDs in maths and physics. So the product that they brought to market was around revolutionizing how companies from a variety of different industries, for example, CPG, telco, software, and many more industries, had been using, for example, price elasticities to make some very significant decisions and very complex decisions with what is now essentially a dated methodology. Now, the Buynomics proposition is essentially a platform which uses our virtual customers method, which leverages modern technology such as machine learning to predict outcomes on what will happen if you change your price, promotional plan, portfolio, or any changes to your product to a degree of 95% plus accuracy, which is unparalleled in the market. And it's a really exciting product to be a part of, I must say. And if you'd like to talk to us about it in more detail, please do drop us a line, and we'd be happy to schedule a meeting where we can take you through exactly how Buynomics can help you in the future. And I will hand over now to Ingo to talk more about price elasticities being the unnecessary evil.
Thank you, David. Yeah, also welcome from my side. I think the title is a bit provocative. I think it came from our marketing team, but I think it's, in this specific context, it's very proper, and we've spoken about elasticity a couple of times already in the past, and I think we thought it's a good time to speak on elasticity again, because we had a survey out in LinkedIn. Maybe some of you have seen it, and essentially the result was we asked two questions. One is, do you use price elasticities for your pricing decisions? And about 3/4 of the respondents said yes. And then we asked a second question is, do you trust these price elasticities, or do you trust the accuracy of the price elasticity? And again, about 3/4 of respondents said that they don't trust the numbers, but they're mostly using it nevertheless. So, and I think this very clearly reflects what we also think about the context about the concept of price elasticity, and why we want to talk about it today, and also maybe offer somewhat of an alternative that makes better use of data, and also, as David showed, is capable of providing better insights on how the market reacts to price changes, for example. But today is going to be mostly about price elasticity, and I think we will start at the very beginning. So lean back and enjoy the webinar. I think we'll speak about some things that are already familiar to most of you, but I think we go in a high speed, so that we will also get into areas that are new to most of you, and are therefore interesting. So why are there price lists here? I think it makes sense to start with this question. I think the key question is for most of us, and you working in the pricing revenue management field, for example, is that you have an offer of products here, products 1, 2, 3. There is an audience, so there is a set of customers or potential customers. And what you want to understand is if you make a change in your offer, if you maybe offer a different product, or more frequently, if you change the price of one of your products, what will happen? And I think our first and maybe also worst answer to that question leads directly to price elasticity. And as you can see on the left side, essentially with these KPIs and the things that we're typically looking at is units. How many units do we sell if we make changes to our offer? How does that affect revenue, and how does that affect profit? But it all starts with the change in sales units. So how does price elasticity help us with that? So again, very simplified, and I think it's very important that also elasticity, particularly the mathematical part of it, is an abstract concept, but it really wants to deal with the real world phenomenon. How do customers react to price changes? And that's also why we're starting at point 0 here. So what does price elasticity do? Or before price elasticity, we have essentially the demand function. And what is that? So we had our group of customers on the previous slide. And if we look at just a single product, and we sort all the potential customers by their willingness to pay here at the bottom from lowest. So this one is, let's say, willing to pay the lowest price. This one here is willing to pay the highest price, and everyone else in between is sorted by how much they're willing to pay. Then this demand function here essentially counts how many people will buy the product at a given price. So if the price, if the price is very high, few people will buy, or no one at some point. And if the price is very low, then everyone will buy. And so you see here, these people will buy, and if we move the price this way, then more of these people will buy, and the one with the lowest will be the last person to buy. And then what does the price elasticity measure? The price elasticity measures essentially how the price change and the volume change are related with each other. So how does the a change in price affect a change in volume? And essentially it's the ratio of these two numbers. So the change in volume, the percentage change in volume divided by the percentage change in price. As a simple example, if you increase the price of a product by 1% and you lose 2% in sales, then your price elasticity is -2. So very simple. And if that works properly, and you can essentially capture everything that's going on in this case, in this one simple number, that would be a very neat thing. And for example, what you can do with it is, let's look at this very simple example, same as elasticity as before. So we have a price elasticity of -1. We have ourselves costs of 100 euros in this case. Then we know, and we can prove this, I think we have it here in the footnote, the outline proof that in the optimum, margin times elasticity is -1. So if we know the price elasticity, we know our costs, and therefore we know the demand at each point, then we know what the optimal price would be. And in this case, the optimal price would be 200 at a margin of 50%. 50% times -2, elasticity is -1, and that's the optimum. So if we're living in a simple world, one product, elasticity is known, costs are known, then we know everything we need to know about pricing. Of course, there's a caveat, actually very many. I think the first one is that this is only valid in the case where you have only one product. So if you're offering a portfolio, or you have competitors that might or might not react to your price changes, then this already doesn't hold true anymore. And more generally, when it gets more complicated, it's also very difficult to deduce to actually apply price elasticities in the sense that you know your price elasticity, and this leads you to the optimal price. I think one of the key challenges that we have is that here in the example of a linear demand function that we also had previously here on some of these slides, is that price elasticity differs at every point of the demand function. So if you are in this point here, you have a price elasticity of -2 in line with our previous examples. If you lower the price, your price elasticity goes down eventually at some point to 0. If you increase the price, your elasticity goes up, so it gets more negative up to minus infinity. So you cannot say that this product has a certain price elasticity because it's different at every point of the demand function. And I think if you look at this example here, this is not some hypothetical or just conceptual issue. This has real life implications. So for example, if you're in the point of an elasticity of -2, which is something very reasonable in many markets, and you increase your price by 10%, you would go from -2 to -2.7. So that's already a massive change in the elasticity. And if you increase by 20 or 30%, this effect will be even larger. So it doesn't make sense to say a product has a price elasticity of X. It's more like, let's say, like a broken watch. Somewhere it's correct. Whatever elasticity you assign to a product, it will have that somewhere, but it's most certainly not in the current price that you're interested in. So this is the first one. I think another key issue that we see with price elasticities is when they're being measured using regression analysis. Very simplified here on the slide. What's going on is you have, let's say you're selling a product through a retailer at different weeks, and you have sales different prices over the year, and you have different sales volumes over the year. And typically, if you do that, and if you correct for, let's say, weather, seasonality, holidays, and so on, you will typically get a relationship like this, that if you have higher prices, you will sell less than when you have lower prices where you sell more. But typically, you will have these points will not be on a straight line because there's all kinds of other things going on. For example, competitors have promotions and the effects of that are not linear. So it's very difficult to exclude them using a regression analysis. And just to highlight what that implies here on the right side. So if your data looks like this ideal world case where everything's on a line, and the true underlying price elasticity here is -2, you will pick that up. So if there's no noise that you're dealing with, you will pick up that -2. But if you have about 50% noise that comes from things that you don't pick up in your regression analysis, like competitor promotions, new products by competitors, and so on, and the noise increases, then your confidence interval also increases. So if you have something like 50% noise, and this or that actually doesn't look too bad if you've done that a lot, determining price elasticities with regressions, then 50% is something. It's gonna be one of the cases you will show because it's one of the good ones. But here again, your 95% confidence interval is -4 to 0. So you can come up with anything between -4 and 0. So so the true elasticity -2, you might be very off, and the implications if you work with elasticities of a value of -1 or -4 is vastly different, and this might just come to you more or less randomly. So the measurement in the traditional way is very, very inaccurate, and even more accurate than you can take, because if you think about how precise you need to know an elasticity to find the optimum margin times elasticity is -1. If you go from -2 to -3, your margin goes from 50% to 33%, and that's a massive price change that implies. So you need to, if you're working with elasticities, you need to know them very precisely, but you cannot measure them very precisely. And then there are all kinds of other difficulties with this elasticity number. Behavioral pricing, I think, is one prominent example. So how do you integrate price thresholds? How do you integrate the preference for the middle option in a portfolio? These things are very difficult to combine with each other. Also, with the price elasticity, you can actually only answer price change questions, and you cannot properly answer the question of what would happen if I offer a different product size. If I go from, I don't know, a 6-pack in one product to a 4-pack or an 8-pack, then price elasticities are not very helpful because you don't have really have a price change in this sense. And one last example I want to mention is what we often see, and I just read a paper on that, that's why we put it on here, is price sensitivity scores. So where you say, okay, expensive products are more are more price sensitive than cheaper products. Products that are being bought very often are more price sensitive than products that are being less often bought. To some of them, there is something. So if you think of this demand function here, you see that if price increases, price elasticity also goes up. So some of them are true, but it's not obvious that products with less sales volume need to be less price sensitive than the fast moving products. This is something we empirically don't see when we look very closely at these differences. So some of these elasticity or price sensitivity, usually they're called price sensitivity and not elasticity, to put like some distance in between. But I think most cases they're intended, they try to mean the same, but they're highly problematic in everything that we're seeing right now. So and let's take a closer look. And I think what we've done so far is we looked at what we're actually trying to answer here is the question of how do products and customers interact at different prices, different portfolios, and what does it tell us about our KPIs, particular sales, revenue, profit, and so on. And I just want to show and also take a look at the elasticity question, how we can be more specific about these topics. And let me share a different screen. David, can you see my browser now?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. So a very simple example, and we still want to talk about the elasticity and what's really going on in this case. So and this is, by the way, our solution, and what it does essentially is it simulates what we call virtual customers or virtual shoppers, and they have the preferences that are being used to derive these demand functions that we've seen on the previous slide. So what we're modeling here is what's actually going on underneath the demand function and the elasticity and so on. And we're working with a very simple example here. So we're selling like an orange stand, so where we're selling orange juice. We have 2 flavors, orange. At some point, we'll get a competitor who sells apple juice, 3 sizes, 0.2 liters, 3.3, and 0.5. And what we do with that is that we offer here small orange juice in this example at 0.2 liters at a certain price. We start with the price of €1, and we look at a price range of 50 cents to €2. And the question is, what's really going on? So we have our sales here. We're selling. Actually, it's not like a lemonade stand, but it's more like a lemonade stand chain. So we're selling 3,500 units here at a price of 150. If we go down in the price to €1, then we'll sell a few more. And we have, when we look at the full demand curve, we have we have a demand like this here. We're selling up to a point of about €2. Demand then goes to 1,600, and demand goes up here. If we sell to at 50 cent, goes up to 8,000. So, and we have revenues. So we're a bit below the revenue optimum. We're quite a bit below the profit optimum, which is somewhere here. And we see that we have this price elasticity curve. And here it also shows what we previously showed on the slides, that elasticity gets very low if we at a very low price, and then elasticity increases with higher prices. So it's different everywhere. It goes in the, I think I would say in the reasonable range between minus 0.3 to almost 4 at this point. And the question is, where's the optimum? So we can go to the profit maximum, which is in this case here at 150. And when you remember the formula we had before, at 150, we have price elasticity of minus 1.8 and times a margin of 60%. So that's very close to 1. It's not exactly 1 in this case because we only have discrete price changes, and the profit optimum might be, I don't know, 147 or 53, somewhere like this. So, but it's very close to what we got from the equation, and we can have full transparency here on what's going on in the market. So this is the simple example. I think it becomes more interesting. So we can look at, for example, a portfolio where we have small orange juice, medium orange juice, large orange juice at different price points. We can now look at things that are going on between the different products. And these are very close to things that are going on also in real world examples when you make changes to your offer. So we have here the price, 160, 190, 230. In the previous example, and this is also an important insight, if you have a portfolio, you tend to have higher prices for each product compared to the single product case. So previously we had, if we were just selling the small orange juice, our optimum was 150. Now here it's 160, and the larger orange juices are a bit more expensive. And we see here again, topic today is elasticity. That elasticities, because we have close substitutes here, is much, much higher than it was before. So before we had between 0.3 and minus 4, and now for this product, elasticity is also 0.3, but it goes here to minus 10. Typically the product in the middle is much more price sensitive, here in the optimum at minus 10.8. So elasticities are much higher for individual products, but if we look for example, at the whole portfolio. And what we're doing here is the question, what happens if we increase the price of each product by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%? Then we see that what we call the portfolio elasticity is at around 1.8. So it doesn't count the customers who switch between different products, but only those who start buying or stop buying a product at all. So you see that the dynamics in a portfolio already much different. Looking at the time, we can look at different cases. So we had the single product selling 3,500 units at the optimum. If we introduce, for example, competition, so our competitor sells orange juice, in the optimum we have less sales, and if we have a portfolio with different options, we sell more. In particular, in the profit, we see that the portfolio is much, much stronger than the single product. And of course, we can also do combinations of these. And we can also, for example, we mentioned that elasticities don't work well with behavioral aspects. So what we did here is, number 4 is a variation of number 3, where we highlighted the middle option, the middle product, said, okay, most people buy this, so this is our special offer today, but at the same price. And we see that we're selling way more of these middle of the medium orange juice, and the product overall is much more profitable than the other option. So if we simulate real customer behavior, you have way more options, and are able to have a much more realistic view of what's going on in the market. And of course, and we'll not go into more details here, but this was I would say, a toy example, but we can also look at a more realistic real-world example that replicates what's really going on in the market. I won't go into details here, but here we have our own brand with 4 products. We have a competitor, so we can have large and full market and use it to look at the specifics of a market and get a very accurate understanding of what happens. For example, if I change the price of a specific product and I see that I increase the price here, lose sales here, but some of these customers will go to another of my own products and some will go to a competitor. All right, so going back to the presentation, I will stop sharing this and go back to the...
Ingo, we've had a couple of questions just come in regarding the example that you've just used. So if we can answer them very quickly. But the question was around the data that feeds into, there's a couple of questions asking the similar thing in terms of the data that feeds into that example, which data the demand function is based on. Is it some estimates or real market data that you've used to actually feed the tool?
Yeah. So for this toy example, I'd say it's made up, but we, of course, and that's the intention of this this method and solution, is to use it for real life challenges. And the way it's done is that we have a basic model of how customers behave. So it knows, for example, like the classical stuff on utilities, and they can also behave like real people. Like meaning that they fall for price thresholds, they prefer the middle option. We had this example before. They are susceptible to promotions and so on. So they can be very realistic. You can turn it off and on. And we then make their behavior specific using the usual data. So for example, transaction data, sales data, sellout data, for example, in consumer goods. And we can also work with all typical studies, conjoint studies, Van Westendorp, Garber-Granger, whatever inputs available. They are all integrated. They're also assessed in what types of data are most useful to get the most reliable picture of what's going on in the market, and with that, the most reliable prediction.
Great, thanks, Ingo.
Okay, so there was, I think we were already at the question section. I think the intention today was to give an overview, talk about mostly about price elasticity and why we think they are not the best tool for most pricing challenges. I think they have some role. I think when you do, for example, simple business cases for your whole assortment. I don't know, you're a large company, you're selling a couple hundred products, and you want to run a business case. You have an understanding that overall, I don't know, just to say a number, price elasticity is -2, and you want to increase your overall prices or your average price by by 2%, then your overall sales will be somewhere around, your sales will drop by about 4%, versus to the situation where you haven't made any price changes. So I think for very rough back of the envelope business cases, elasticities can be helpful, but they're not helpful for specific pricing decisions. For those, both the elasticity is that you get with typical methods, it's way too rough and unprecise, and also the implications you can draw from them are not exact enough for actual decision making.
Great, thanks, Ingo. There's another question that's come in here. Can this model also be applied for e-commerce, considering the price changes in e-commerce?
Yeah, so we applied in e-commerce. What's important is that it replicates the actual purchasing decision. So that it can consider things like where you in e-commerce, the way products are displayed on a website. If you say, okay, if you highlight a product, these are all informations that can be used, and it needs to replicate the actual decision what customers see when they choose between products, the potential discounts, and the place they're on the website. So the more information, the better it gets, and it also helps you to be more effective with these strategies, when you say, okay, what products to highlight and how this might interact with the pricing of your portfolio.
Okay, I think we've got time for one last question. So thanks for sending all these questions through. How does the system handle promotional and RSP pricing?
Yeah, so promotion pricing, what we see is that there are essentially two effects. One is the price effect. If you have a promotion and a price reduction, then that affects sales. And the other one is because of the promotion, demand can be higher, so more people come to your product and consider it. And these two, so the pure promotional effect, which is often an increase in the number of people considering the product, and the price effect, we model essentially separately in the tool and then bring them together. And this allows you to, for example, choose between different promotion options and different discounts that you want to give. So yes.
Great. I think that is the last of the questions. Thank you all very much.
And we'll answer the rest by email.
Yes. So any other questions unanswered, please get in contact with us if there is any more. So thank you all very much for your time. Just before we sign off, our next webinar will be on the 27th of August, where Ingo will be talking more about the virtual customers method that we have, to explain in more detail to how that helps really drive some powerful decision making across the business. And there's a few more webinars we have in the series coming up. Tend to be short 30-minute webinars, so you can digest all we say to you. Any suggestions of other things that you'd like us to cover, please get in contact with Paul, Ingo, or myself. We'll happily discuss any other topics you'd like us to look at in the future. Thanks again, and thanks, Ingo, for taking us through the presentation this afternoon. And have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks. See you next time.